Hey, North Dakota, Rob Port here.
And I'm Chad Oban. You're invited to a special live recording of Plain Talk on Wednesday, February 19th at the Peacock Alley in beautiful downtown Bismarck.
We'll be interviewing special guests, reacting to the latest headlines, and answering questions from the audience.
Admission is free, so plan to arrive early to grab a great spot. The reporting kicks off at 6 p.m., and after the show, Rob and I will stick around if for some reason you want to meet us.
That's Wednesday, February 19th at Peacock Alley in Bismarck, starting at 6 p.m.
We'll see you there.
You'd expect to see the North Dakota oil and natural gas industry working at wells and processing facilities. What you might not know is our oil and gas industry also works to build roads, provide school funding, and even protect us from flooding by creating nearly 50,000 jobs statewide and generating billions of tax dollars annually to support our infrastructure, our great outdoors, and our schools. North Dakota Petroleum Foundation, advancing the possibilities.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Ladies and gentlemen, the next time after this show that you tune into Plain Talk, it will be our live show, live from Peacock Alley in Bismarck, which I am both excited and anxious about. Not anxious in any way. I mean, Matt, our producer, has been doing a wonderful job in organizing all this. I think it's going to be a fun event. I'm really kind of anxious. I am not used to doing what I do in front of a crowd. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. And it's good, right, to get out of our comfort zone a little bit, Chad?
Yeah, and just so you know, I've organized a group of people to boo you every time you talk at the live event. And so just be prepared for, I thought that would maybe take the edge off a little bit, make you feel a little more comfortable.
You thought heckling me would make me feel more comfortable. Maybe, I mean, that's my natural environment. It's just, writing stuff and then reading my hate mail. So,
hey, listen, Rob, after listening to the interview that you and Aaron had with Drew Wrigley, it seems like just getting really angry and yelling about people who disagree with you is the way we should do things. So I'll get the hecklers going so you can yell at them.
I should note I had a really good conversation with Drew after that interview. He and I are not going to see eye to eye on the truth in sentencing, mandatory minimums legislation, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, he apologized for getting pretty aggressive. The one part where I got a little heated was when he accused me of wanting to shut all the prisons down, which, I mean, whatever else you want to say about my position, that may have never argued for wanting to shut all the prisons down. And I think he was frustrated and he accused me of that. I'm trying to cover a situation where the attorney general is accusing a cabinet member of lying and deception and everything. And it is, I mean, it's very uncomfortable. He's saying a lot of things you can't take back, and but he believes them and he's standing by him, and he's I guess we're gonna see where that debate goes. But I'm in a position of having to cover this stuff. We're in a position of having to cover this stuff, and we gave him his time, and he made his case, and that's all.
I mean, I know it was just sort of dumb luck that you ended up with Drew and the governor back to back talking about this, but I think you really saw a difference in styles on how they handle a public policy debate. I think the fact that Kelly has been in the legislative branch and understands that you have to build a coalition. You can't just go in with a sledgehammer. Drew's been in a courtroom. It's a different thing. And I think hopefully Drew figures out from this that, I mean, calling people names and doing the stuff that he's doing to Colby Brown, who I don't know from Adam, right? But if I listen to the two sides, there's one side that seems more level-headed and, calm about the argument. That's what I'm attracted to. And so I hope Drew understands that if you want to bring people to your side, you can't just demonize the other team. So this is exactly what we predicted. would happen back in between the election and the legislative session. We predicted that this would be a very contentious issue between the people who are on either side of this thing, and it's proving to be the case.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. In fact, I said that the dynamic between the attorney general, I think I wrote about this. I think I even talked about it at a readers board meeting for the forum. Where I think this dynamic between the attorney general and the governor is going to be interesting. In a lot of ways, they get along great. In a lot of ways, they do not. And it's hard because you're navigating policy disagreements and then maybe personal disagreements, and it gets tricky. It gets hard.
And you have ambitious politicians, who have sort of been on the same trajectory. I mean, there's all kinds of dynamics here, and you have the defense attorney and a prosecutor who look at this issue completely different. I just wish we could do it without the aggressiveness that we saw from the attorney general, and I think, frankly, he probably watched that interview or listened to that interview and thought, I'm not sure I handled that the way I should have.
He liked everyone. I was getting some accusations on social media that I was talking over Drew. And in the one clip that we had, and it's a good clip. It's a good highlight from the show. But it was me kind of getting, it was the part where I got a little upset, where he accused me of saying that I just wanted to close all the prisons down. He and I were laughing after that. And he liked, the attorney general liked every one of those videos on social media. I mean, he saw them all. Yeah. And I think he knows there's a better tone to take. His argument is what it is, and he has every right to his argument. I don't think he's necessarily got the right of it entirely, but that's not the problem that I disagree with him. The problem is the approach, and I think he's starting to recognize the approach maybe isn't going to pay the dividends he's hoping. Hey, later in the show, we're going to have Senator Michelle Axman on to talk about education savings accounts. The House has a number of bills, but the big one is the Senate bill, which has a big fiscal note and some things happening with the fiscal note that are going to be interesting that we'll talk to the senator about. I don't want to preview that.
I would just also mention, just before we get into that, on the House side, they did pass out one bill yesterday, a Koppelman's bill, which is, just a straight up money for private school parents. And then another bill that is an ESA with some matching funds from Pat Heinert lost by one vote. I suspect that's going to get brought back this afternoon. Will probably pass. So I think we're going to winnow the 6 ESA bills down to probably 3 or 4 and let the fights continue. Because, I don't know if you saw it, and we'll get into this, but Brandon Pritchard's group put out an email saying they don't like Heinert's and Axman's, but they like the other one. So I think you're seeing a little division between the far right and the mods again, the normies.
It surprised me that Koppelman's bill got through the House.
I think the only reason it did is because Heinert's failed. They wanted a vehicle. I don't think LaForce stands up on Koppelman's bill to help pass it if Heinert's bill passed. I think the House wanted a vehicle, and that was the last bill.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And part of what surprises me too is just straight up for public schools, you're going to run into the rural problem with that. And so it surprises me that because the rurals have like rural lawmakers that doesn't really Representative Anna Novak, made that point pretty forcefully, where there's just not a lot of benefit. If you're living in a rural community, like she's from Beulah Hazen area up in coal country, they don't have private schools. That doesn't help them. So the ESA concept, it has to be a broad concept that covers a spectrum of things that are beneficial to people who live in North Dakota's larger communities and the smaller communities.
And then you run into that costs a lot of money.
It does cost a lot.
It costs a lot of money. But we'll have plenty of time with Senator Axman.
Yeah, we're previewing a topic we're going to discuss. We were supposed to have Representative Hoverson on today. Now, his 10 Commandments bill failed, but we were going to talk to him about why he put that in the first place, but also some of the other legislation that's out there, the intelligent design legislation, the Christ is King legislation, all of these things. He's a religious leader in his day job, and he's a very vocal proponent of a lot of these things in the legislature. But he was sick. He said he's just not feeling well, and which happens. It seems every legislative session, right? There's a bug that tears through it. So he had to cancel today, but was looking forward to that conversation. I'm wondering what the status of my hypothesis about cultural bills so far.
I think your status that people are pushing back on these things is probably pretty accurate still at this point. I
At this
mean, what we
point,
had
we have a lot of hurdles to get
right.
over.
But I mean, on the 10 commandments, that got a 10-2 do pass out of committee and then got absolutely throttled on the floor. You had people like Jamie Davis standing up and talking about it from a Native American perspective. You had Pat Heinert and Mike Nathy standing up from a Catholic perspective and also the lawsuit perspective. It was a very interesting group that opposed the 10 commandments and absolutely throttled it.
One of the reasons I love the legislative process is because I look at these bills when they get submitted, and I obviously have reactions to them, and those reactions get filtered through my lived experience and my knowledge. But particularly in the committee room, how often these bills bring out points that I hadn't considered. And so there was a native, and I am remiss in not remembering her name, but she was a Native American woman who spoke on the Christ is King resolution, about the history of like Christian missionaries in North Dakota and the perspective of Native, like declaring this for Native Americans who sometimes, they obviously have traditional spiritual beliefs and things like that. And but also like the history of Christianity sometimes is kind of ugly in this part of the world. I mean, we're still digging bodies out of the ground from some boarding schools and whatnot. It's that perspective I thought was powerful and not one that I had considered, which I don't think is I don't have that lived experience. I'm not
Right.
a part of that history. But hearing it, I mean, it's valid and it's pertinent, and that was really compelling to me.
So we had the 10 commandments that went down, but then the Christ is King resolution got a overwhelmingly do not pass out of committee. I think it was 8-1 or something like that. I thought that hearing was really interesting because Representative Nico Rios, who we probably talk about more than he deserves on this podcast, I mean, basically stood up and said, I found God, and so everybody else should find God too. I don't think that's the legislative process. But then you had clergy stand up and say, whoa, this is not the way this should work. And I was proud of the committee for basically seeing through this and saying this is not, because it is a messaging bill. I also thought it was interesting Representative Rios started his testimony by saying, where is everybody? Because there are so many missing legislators from that committee. And I don't know if they chose not to come because they thought it was a waste of their time or, there is illness going through the Capitol right now or what. But I was proud of the committee. And I think it does back up your early on thoughts that some of these religious sort of culture war things aren't getting the oxygen that they have in previous sessions.
I think there's a weariness with them. We're also a little bit removed from pandemic, which kind of turned the volume up. Everybody was stuck at home and maybe had more time than they needed to get upset about some of these things. I think the real litmus test, it's going to be interesting. The intelligent design bill, sort of, inserting intelligent design into curriculum in North Dakota schools, which first of all, I don't like the legislature micromanaging curriculum in the first place. In fact, I even thought, some of the stuff that is more benign even than this, like the citizenship stuff or the patriotic stuff when we're putting it in and students have to take,
the civics test, which is open
civics
book
test.
and everybody passes it. Again, it's kind of like forcing the pledge.
I mean,
That's not teaching
listen,
people
I
things.
like civics and I
Right.
do. I mean, sometimes I look at Facebook and I worry about the woeful level of civic knowledge that is available there, or that is on display there. But some of those bills, like the intelligent design bill, which by the way has legislative leaders on it, and the book ban bill, Senator Bame's book ban bill, those are kind of a litmus test, I think, for my hypothesis. If those go down, I think we can really say there's been a shift at the legislature.
Intelligent design is going to pass, Rob.
You think
I
so?
mean, I think when the two majority leaders basically said, we're Christians, so therefore we should put this into curriculum, I think it was a huge mistake. I think the book ban, again, because of the people who are behind it, I mean, Senator Bame doesn't have a bunch of followers. I think that's going to run into some problems. Also, librarians.
Senator Hogue's on the book ban bill.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Senator Hogue's on some terrible bills. There's like also an anti-DEI bill that was heard this week that basically said you can't teach that one group is superior to another group, and doesn't really clarify what that means. So North Dakota United testified against and said, so how do you teach the Holocaust? Because clearly the Germans thought they were superior to the Jews. How do you
Right.
teach
You're not
those things?
right. I mean, obviously nobody's teaching that I mean, I hope nobody's teaching that
Yeah.
the Nazis were right.
But they believed it.
That was their belief.
Yeah. And what frustrates me also about that bill is the exact same bill is passed in Florida, the exact same bill. Like literally every sentence is the same. And I hate those bills that legislators take from other states and then just introduce them as is. So, I
Especially when
think
it comes to like cultural bills, like I don't think there's a wrong with saying, well, Texas has a really good approach to regulating oil wells. We can
or AI. Yeah, I think you're right. But especially these things that are mostly cultural and messaging bills, it frustrates me. So, we will see. I mean, it is problematic when the majority leaders get on some of these bills. I think they obviously bring some juice, but we're talking about books again. What's the Yogi Berra saying? It's deja vu all over again. It sometimes feels like that every legislative session.
Yeah. It is, and by the way, the Senator Bain bill once again, and I was watching the committee discussion about this, and there's a portion of it because a part of what his bill amends is a portion of state statute that basically deals with like porn. I mean, it's kind of an anachronism now, but deals with like porn magazines that would be on sale in um like gas stations or whatnot, convenience stores. And obviously, like a lot of times you see them and they're sealed in plastic or they're behind the counter. And the reason for that is in statute it says you can't have that kind of stuff on display. And so they modify that to include books. And so it's a part of the statute that applies to any business in the state, not just libraries, but anywhere
bookstores,
Barnes and Noble, anywhere where kids can go, right? Obviously, I bring my kids in Barnes and Noble all the time at the mall here in Minot. And if you have a book in there, right, that's available, that's open, right, the material's open. So if you think of all the books that are just sitting on bookshelves, you could grab one down and open it and read it. If it has pictures in it, I guess look at the pictures. Anything like that has to be sealed or put in a place that's not accessible to children. So, I mean, if you have the Game of Thrones or, a book that I just bought recently, A Clockwork Orange, or some of these books, I mean, they have sex scenes in them. They have violent scenes in them. And they're not, I will admit that they're not appropriate for kids. But that statute, the idea is, well, it just applies to schools. It just applies to libraries. When I read that statute, no, it doesn't. And when they were discussing it in committee, they were like, well, no, it doesn't apply to private bookstores because this is already in statute. But it's like, but you're amending it and you're expanding the definition of what's prohibited. It absolutely applies to private businesses.
And you have this thing, while the government is trying to, save us from ourselves, there's also a bill going through that, parents have the fundamental right to every aspect of their child's life, which I agree with the concept of that. But is it my responsibility as a parent to decide what my kid reads, or is it the legislature? You can't have it both ways. You can't say but I only want to give fundamental rights to parents who agree with me. That's what the legislature is telling us with these bills.
When I look at when you drill down and you look at some of the fights at like the library board level or the school board level, and you look at some of the books that they're wanting to, I'm remembering Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut was one in the Williston School District, and somebody was against it, and they said, well, it's violent and it portrays war, it's violent and ugly. It's like, yeah, that was the point. That was the whole point. But I think about that. Those books I collect used books. I absolutely love books. I have close to 800 books in my home. Those books are sitting on a shelf where my children can get at them at any time. So I don't understand why, and again, that's my choice in my home and I as a parent, but I don't understand. And I am really hoping that people have come to look at their libraries. Go visit your library, go talk to your librarian. They're not villains. They are not trying to turn your kid gay.
So I think that's a really, really interesting point. I would want to add, if you read the Bible close enough, there's some violence in there and some unbecoming things as well. But I would encourage legislators to go to their public library, to go to their public schools. I mean, so often you hear from these legislators who are saying this is happening, this is happening, this is happening because they saw it on Facebook or they saw it somewhere else.
When was the
Go to
last time you were in there?
Yeah, go to a public school, spend a day with a teacher, spend a day with an administrator, really find out what's going on in those schools. It'll make you a better legislator, I guarantee it.
I think sometimes, because you're right, I think they see it on social media, on X or Facebook or something like that, YouTube, and maybe there really is a librarian somewhere who's just out of hand, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there is. I mean, there's a lot of librarians in this country.
Hey,
And
Rob, I would suggest there's some lawmakers up at the Capitol who are completely out of hand. We would hate to judge all our legislators based on that.
that's fair. That's fair. But I mean, just because you see some weirdo librarian in San Francisco who's maybe really trying to do something we can all agree is untoward, and I'm making this up. I don't have a specific example in mind, but I mean, maybe if that doesn't mean it's happening in your community. That doesn't mean you could just say all librarians are doing this. That's not the case. I mean, do we have I mean, we should make legislation when we have a real problem to solve in North Dakota. I don't perceive that we have a problem to solve in North Dakota.
Again, there's a bunch of people at the Capitol who only want families and individuals in the state to act the way they want them to act and believe the same things and think the same things. We saw it with the debate, and you wrote a great article about it today about Lori Van Winkle's comments about folks who are struggling with fertility. And she basically said, if you want to set it up, but it was one of the most disgusting and offensive things I've heard in a long time. And I think about the families who have gone through IVF treatment and other things, and you have a state lawmaker who's basically saying God has made this choice because you did something wrong.
It is one of the most, as you said, one of the most fundamentally ugly and hurtful things I have ever heard an elected official say on the floor of our legislature. It is, and I think we've been very lucky in my family. We have never had any problems with fertility. When we've wanted to have children, we've had 3 of them, and it's been wonderful. And we are very lucky in that regard. Not everybody is, and how difficult that is. I mean, I mean how fundamental the desire to procreate is in humanity, right? I mean, it's a primal thing. It is a fundamental thing. And when you can't do it, it shouldn't surprise any of us that there are very hard feelings. A lot of people, they struggle with it emotionally. They feel like there's something wrong with them. They really do feel like they're being cursed. And it takes a lot of work to convince them there's nothing wrong with you. You haven't been cursed. Sometimes things just work out the way they work out, and try to have a healthy attitude. And to have somebody like that say that this is God, her God, cursing you is repugnant. I mean, even setting aside how we may or may not feel about the legislation that was being debated, which I thought was stupid legislation, which, by the way, is another cultural bill that went down in absolute flames. Would it get 10 votes? I just, what she said, even aside from that, I mean, Lori Van Winkle is not fit to sit in the legislature. She's going to say things like that. It's disgusting.
So in the risk of being a little bit too open here, I mean, I don't think it's a surprise to people that Aaron and I adopted our son, right? I mean, you generally don't jump to adoption unless there's other things that have led to that. And so I think about us. I think about friends of ours who are literally in the process of doing IVF right now. People you and I both know, Rob, who every 6 months are living and dying with test results that they're getting back. Has it stuck? How's it going? Having miscarriages that absolutely just wreck them. And then this woman stands on the floor and says, basically, you did this to yourself and you deserve it. I don't know. There's nothing I can say beyond you. I agree with you. She does not deserve to be a legislator. And every woman, every family should look at this person, because I guarantee there's nobody listening to this podcast who doesn't know somebody or love somebody who's had issues with fertility. And what is she saying to those children that were born through IVF? What is she? There's a lot of people who become parents because of science.
I guess the logical conclusion is that they've evaded God's will, God's will. I don't want. It's so stupid. It's like I don't even want to parse it. Like what? There's no logic to it. It's just
mean,
vile hatred.
And I didn't watch the debate. I'll be honest. I read your article. I didn't watch it. Did anybody stand up and say, "This is wrong. What you just said offends people"? I mean, I think what elected officials don't understand is people are watching this stuff.
They're
think, watching it and hearing these words, and they're saying, "This is what the state thinks of me."
I have watched so much. If I'm remembering right, most of the people who stood up were supporters of the bill, but I don't think anybody, because I think everybody knew where it was going.
Yeah,
and they were just letting. I don't think anybody felt like they had to stand up because it was almost like it was self-defeating. That was the sense I got.
Yeah,
that was my read on the room. Was just like sometimes you just point like, listen, she said it, and it's self-defeating, and really, I would argue after she probably cost herself votes. Like there may have been some people who were very pro-life and were on, and that was a ridiculous bill. If you don't know what it was, it would have basically meant it amended like the criminal statutes around murder and assault and things like that to include the unborn. So basically, and the way she put it, and there's some science about what Plan B does, and Representative Lori Van Winkle clearly doesn't understand it, but she was even talking about like taking, abortifacient pills or whatnot. Even that would be, basically if you took a pill that caused you not to get pregnant, in her mind, that's murder. And it's absurd.
I would just also add, this is bad for Christianity. If you're a Christian and you have Lori Van Winkle standing on the floor and saying this, and then you have Nico Rios being the spokesperson for Christ as King by using the words of white national or Christian nationalists from hundreds of years ago, this doesn't move Christianity forward at all. I think it's bad for Christianity. It's bad for their brand.
So let's I think you're right, and the reason I think that is a lot of what we're seeing right now with the Trump movement and the MAGA movement and all of that, and really what you could say is kind of a larger backlash against Democrats, really has some roots in what I perceived as progressive or liberal overreach on issues like DEI, on issues like trans girls in sports. Like we've really had some cultural things that were being they went too far. Like even if at the beginning it's justified, right? Like you want equality between the races, but we get to a point where it's like we're condoning police stations getting burned down. Like it went too far. And maybe some of it, the perception's unfair, but perception is reality. And there was perception that it went too far. And some of it, there are times when Trump's riding herd on DEI or somebody just said something stupid that I kind of enjoy it. Cause it's like, yeah, in some ways you had this coming. But here's the thing, Christians, is when there's overreach, there's backlash. And so if you're this overreach you're doing right now, maybe you can get some of these bills through, but there will be a backlash because when you go too far, the voters will turn on you. Are you ready for that? Are you ready for the damage that you're doing to your own cause? Because right now, Democrats and liberals are reaping the whirlwind of some overreach, right? That can happen to Republicans and Christians too.
Right. And, I think when we talk about things like DEI and other things, it's also how do you define those things? And I think people have a very bad definition. I mean, if we're training people on how to understand differences and get along and all that kind of stuff, that's a really important thing, right?
I agree.
But some of it.
But if it's a DEI policy that says, well, because men were historically on top, then you specifically, Matt Smith, don't get this job or don't get admitted. Is that fair?
Well, yeah, I think that's sort of a simplistic look at it, Rob. As you can imagine, we could talk about DEI for the end of time. I just think when we blanketly say things like DEI are bad, and it's such a wide swath and people define it so differently, that we sort of get into trouble.
I guess what I was trying to say is I'm in favor of, hey, let's get along, let's be nice to each other, let's try to understand each other. I'm not in favor of we're admitting too many Asians, so we have to block Asians from getting admitted to college so that other people can get admitted. I don't want to do the sort of thing that we have to drag one group of people down to create equality. I want to lift everybody up. And if the policy has to hurt one group to help another group, it's the
So-
wrong policy. That's
so,
my
yeah,
personal.
Yeah, in risk of, I know we have Senator Axman waiting to jump on, but what does that mean in terms of veterans preference?
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, do we
Fair
get rid of veterans preference because it puts veterans ahead of other people? So it is just a bigger conversation than people maybe want it to be.
No, I think that's completely fair. It's when we start giving preference to one group of people over another, we create a lot of problems and a lot of even when it's well intentioned, like veterans preference, well intentioned. Even I would argue, preference for racial communities, Native Americans, blacks, even that well intentioned, trying to create some actual social and economic rights and some wrongs. But that doesn't, I mean, the good intentions don't necessarily justify the policy. All right. We're going to take a break and then we're going to come back. Senator Axman joining us. We're going to talk education savings account coming up next.
The work done by the thousands of North Dakota oil and natural gas workers is working to improve energy independence and national security. Working to make America more competitive around the world. And working to provide a better today and tomorrow for everyone in North Dakota and across our country. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas works for our future. North Dakota Petroleum Foundation, advancing the possibilities.
Welcome back. As promised, we're going to talk education savings accounts. And there's a number of bills about ESAs or school or the school choice policy question in general. We had our guest, Senator Axman, on back before the legislative session started, talking about, because this was something that a lot of work was done on in the interim, and specifically the concept of education savings accounts, which in my mind, I almost see as distinct from school choice. I think school choice can be a part of ESAs, but I think the appeal of ESAs, the benefit of ESAs is a lot bigger than that. And I say that as somebody who supports school choice. I absolutely. But I mean, I really like the idea of making funds available and giving parents who have some special needs kids the ability to access some additional help or tutoring or whatever they need. Kids that are really excelling in a particular area and getting them to a camp or getting them to some extra classes to enhance that. I think giving North Dakotans that flexibility, which we could do with ESAs, would be fantastic. But the school choice, as we've seen from our letters to the editor, we have a lot of people who are perceive that as taking funding away from public schools. In fact, we have somebody who believes that on this call, Chad.
Hi, Chad. Yeah. Can I comment on that, Rob?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's why I'm here, right? Well, first off, thanks, Rob and Chad, for having me on to discuss this. I'm super excited to let the public know where we're at in terms of all the bills I'm bringing forward, and the potential. But you're spot on. I don't know if you heard on the floor yesterday, even just talking about the amendment on Senate Bill 2400, someone tried to say, well, this isn't really a school choice bill. And that was a dig at the bill. And I'm like, no, you're right. Like, it's not a school choice bill. This is, I coined it an educational opportunities bill because it's so much more than that. And so, in fact, when we worked on the bills over the summer, I actually found we just stopped even calling it school choice. We just called it educational opportunities because it was so much less about choosing one school over the other and so much more about families choosing an educational opportunity.
I mean, making some funds available for tuition if somebody chooses to go to private school, that can be a part of it.
Yep, but that's also an educational opportunity for them.
But it's about a lot of other stuff, and that's what's really, because I really want ESAs as a concept. I want to get the foot in the door, and I want to include all the things that most people agree on, and then we can talk about the controversial stuff. That's my thought. Your bill is Senate Bill 2400.
Correct.
And tell us where that's at. I know it's gotten some fiscal notes recently. I had one, and then the fiscal note came down quite a bit. Walk us through where that's at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I just actually brought it forward to the Education Division of Appropriations this morning. So the amendment passed on the floor. My committee they wanted to amend not the dollar amounts, but the qualifying percentages. So They moved the 200 to 300% of federal poverty level and the 400 to 500. That amendment did pass on the floor. And then just this morning, the bill as amended was heard in the Appropriations Division. And they mentioned they probably would not take action on it until Monday or Tuesday.
So, Senator, you're going to be shocked by the things that I'm going to bring up here. So I think one of the interesting things about ESAs is I think that there is universal acceptance of the concept of ESAs, but the controversy comes with who gets the money and how that can be spent. So I'm going to talk about two different things that I don't like about your bill, and I'd like you to respond to those things. And then I'd like to dive deeper into the fiscal note if we have time as well. But so the one thing is, obviously, that I strongly disagree with money being able to be used for private schools. And the reason I disagree with that simply that public dollars shouldn't be used for private school tuition. But in addition, all the other things we're talking about in terms of things that can be used by the ESA are things that are in addition to what the government is already funding. Private school tuition is replacing something the government is already funding, right? So we're paying for a K through 12 public school. And if I'm a public school parent, you're giving me money so I can pay for things outside of that public school. But the private school tuition piece literally is something that we're already funding. So we're paying for that twice. So that's one piece. The second piece, you mentioned that there's the change in the means testing on the private school side. That does not. The private school and public school students are not treated the same. So somebody who's low income and sends their kids to private schools gets more money than somebody who's going to a public school and is low income. I don't think that's fair. I think every student should be treated the same way, if it's just $1,000 across the board or the means testing. And the reason I bring this up is I got an email last week from a former principal at the state's largest private school, who basically said, in the Catholic system in Bismarck, if a Catholic student wants to go to the Catholic school, the Catholic Church finds the money for them to be able to go to that school. So we're not really subsidizing that low-income private school student. We're subsidizing that school instead. Whereas if I'm a public school parent and I'm at 200% of poverty and my kid has disabilities and all these other things, I'm not getting subsidized by the school to pay for those things. So why private school tuition, and why not treat everybody equally? Because I think those are two fundamental flaws in the policy, which overall isn't terrible if those two things were removed.
That was a lot, Chad. So
Yeah, I understand. But I also just said, Andrew, just so you know, I
Yeah.
know how these podcasts work. It might never get back to me to ask another question.
Yeah.
So I need to get all my stuff in.
you can call me anytime, Chad, to ask this question. But
I feel attacked by that, Chad. I feel attacked.
so, okay, I don't even know where to start with all of that.
Private school tuition, and why not treat everybody fairly?
Okay, we don't ever treat everybody fairly in any we have income tax level differences. We have differences there. Where the differences in the tiered for the private school, the non-public school students really came from raising the families that are at those income levels up, because they don't have a fair shot right now at affording a private school tuition if they feel that that is the best learning environment for their kid. So if you're making $62,000 as a family of four, I don't know how right now you afford two kids if you feel like the non-public education provides a better learning environment.
Well, Senator, can I just jump in with one
Yeah.
thing? But how about the fact that the school
Yeah.
is covering those expenses right now? And even if you go to Light of Christ's website, it says that pretty clearly. If you're Catholic, we'll make sure that you can go.
Absolutely, Chad. That's not every school. So that's one. And how long can we continue to do that? If everyone felt like that was the best learning environment, do they have the funds to continue to do that? No, obviously, the donations of the church are going to run out at some point.
Is that because my niece and nephew went to Catholic school in Minot, and I don't think that
It
was
is not correct. Yeah. So not every private school does.
Yeah, I don't know that that's a universal thing even among the Catholic schools.
It's not. And that can't be continued forever. If every student said, I can't afford that. And some of the schools don't means test if it's, for that. And so the policies range so widely across our non-public schools. Some don't take any tuition assistance. Some do. And when, you think about that, there's a lot of other schools that have range in tuitions as well. So that's where the tiered came from, is looking at those income thresholds and finding, is that the best environment? I'd like to kind of talk a little bit, Chad, about one point you brought up is that the $1,000 for the public school supplements and enhances what they're getting, but the other is just a trade out. I see your point, Chad, but I also have seen something different. So I have my older child is a little reserved and hesitant and self-conscious at times. And her now going to a religious school has opened her up. She has relied so much on the faith aspect that she has gained in school to an extent well beyond what my husband and I have taught her. And that has really allowed her to gain confidence in herself through that, to then now learn better and have confidence in her education. So I think for some kids, there's other aspects in a certain non-public. Let's look at a school in Fargo, full circle. That school, you can't tell me that doesn't provide educational opportunities outside that the public school can offer right now. So I think we can't just say that that's a direct substitute, because there are sometimes things that are happening different in the non-public schools that do offer different educational opportunities. So I don't think it's just a direct wipeout of what they would be getting one for one.
So your bill specifically, I know, and the House did something. They ended up passing a bill, and I think Chad and I kind of agree that the House bill that is passed is more about the House having a vehicle than maybe them being satisfied with that end product. But I kind of feel like your bill is the vehicle for this whole issue right now. It's really kind of the one that I'm paying the most attention to. As it's been amended, kind of describe, what does it do right now? I mean, what are things?
Absolutely.
What does
Yep.
it make available for North Dakotans right now?
Okay, let's talk about it. Thanks, Rob. Okay, so the Senate Bill 2400 provides an educational savings account, which we'll refer to probably as an ESA, as we have and will continue to, just to make it easier. The fund would be run through the Department of Public Instruction, and it would provide every single student in North Dakota an opportunity to have access to funds to be utilized through, you may have heard it, families could maybe hear it as a digital wallet or a digital marketplace, an ESA marketplace. So let's talk about the tiers that would kind of show what each student would qualify for. So the bill 2400 breaks it down into 3 tiered systems. So the first tier would be every public school student in the state. No qualifiers there. So every public school student, their family would have $1,000 per student. They'd log on to, it's similar to like Amazon. It's a very nice user-friendly marketplace where they could filter out what they feel is their most needed educational opportunity for their kid, whether that be speech therapy, dyslexia services, a STEM camp in the summer. Let's say they're a rural community. The cost of dual credit is very high, and it's really well used in our rural students. They could cover the cost of that. If their school doesn't offer French class, they could take even a college accredited course and use the funds for that. They could use high quality online tutoring. They could use in-place tutoring. So very wide range of educational opportunity expenses that would be qualified on the marketplace. So $1,000, tier 1, every student. Tier 2 would be those students who choose to get their education at a participating non-public school. So the school would have to agree to participate in the program. At that point, the student would receive funds based on the family's percentage of federal poverty level. As the bill stands right now with the amendment, the first tier in this second tier would be families within 300% of federal poverty level would receive $4,000 per student. And then families within 500% of federal poverty level would receive $2,500 per student. And then those above the 500 would receive $1,000 per student. Those could be used for tuition or for any other educational expense that's listed on the marketplace. There's a caveat in there, and I kind of thought through this one back and forth a lot. And originally, my original bill had it where it was tied to the school, but now the accountability feature built into that is if its parent does choose to use the funds towards tuition at a non-public participating school, that student would be required to follow North Dakota statute regarding the state assessments as well for a level of accountability. Third tier would be all of our home educated students, and they would be able to receive $1,000 to be used to enhance their home education journey, whether that be if they need additional speech therapy or a language course that the parent doesn't feel qualified to teach, they could use that as well. But also on the marketplace. I will say we've heard a lot of debate on from home educated families. Some say, I want nothing to do with that. However, I've also received a lot that say that would be great. It would help us cover that expense. But I do want to make sure that everyone is clear. In Senate Bill 2400, for home educated families that opt in to receive the money, it just links to the current statute. So it does not require to do them anything additional. If they are currently following the law per century code, they would be able to opt in and qualify for the funds.
Senator, let's talk
Yeah.
a little bit about the cost of the program.
Sure.
When this bill was introduced and went through the policy committee, there was not a fiscal note, which I don't know if that's normal, but I don't think that's ideal. But it did. So there was a fiscal note that came out 2 days ago that basically looked at 100% participation in all these programs. And that fiscal note was $158 million for 1 year. So about 320 over a biennium for cost to continue beyond this biennium. The new fiscal note's $105 million, which would mean 210 for those keep doing math at home, for the second biennium. It makes some really, really silly assumptions, in my opinion. I mean, we just said earlier that, if a family is under that poverty level, that in order to go to a private school, they would need the subsidy from the state, but yet the fiscal note says only 50% of people will use it. I think we've seen in other states where we lowball the fiscal note and then it ends up costing way more moving forward. I actually joked to Rob yesterday, I've never seen a fiscal note try to pass a bill. Usually it's fiscal notes to kill a bill. But, I think the truth is probably somewhere in between 158 and 105 million. I don't think 100% is going to use it, but I also don't think it's between 50 and 70% as the new fiscal note.
Can
How
I
would-
clear that up, Chad?
Yep. And then I
Well,
want to follow up.
100% would be in those tiers. So it does account for so the second tier of the program, we're at 100, we used 100% in that fiscal note. So 100% would utilize the funds in tier 2. It's just 50% would be in those buckets of the 300 and 500%. But you are correct that tier 1 and tier 3 are at 70% take up and utilization rates.
Okay. So let's even say the 105 is correct. That's the equivalent for a full biennium of a 7% and 7% increase in public school funding, because 1 and 1 is about $30 million. The idea that I would come into the legislature and ask for a 7 and a 7, or with the original fiscal note, a 10 and a 10, we would get laughed out of the Capitol, right? And so why would there be money for this sort of new big government program to do this stuff when we haven't been willing to invest that in public schools in the past? Because the governor, I think, had $44 million per biennium in his budget, and this is twice as much on the lower end for just 1 year.
Yeah, I agree, Chad. The fiscal note's big. However, I will say, I've done a lot of research on the national data coming out that our GDP impact from COVID and learning loss is in the billions of dollars. And so I think an investment in each individual student is timely. Now, sure, could we put it into the formula? We could. However, that's not investing in each individual student. And I would argue that the impact for each individual student, I know you're.
No,
Yes,
I just disagree with that. I mean, I think if
Yeah.
we add more teachers and more support staff and all that kind of stuff, I think it is helpful for certainly my student. I mean, I walk into a school every day and see the successes he's having.
I wonder.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Rob.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, Senator, but I wonder. I mean, I don't know that To me, it's just two different types of doing education spend. I mean, one way we could certainly put it in the schools, and we have wonderful educators. My wife's a teacher. My kids go to the Minot Public Schools. I'm very happy with the Minot Public Schools. I think they do a great job, and I want to see those people come. But this is another way to help you. I mean, you say put in place more support staff. Well, I don't know if I have $1,000 available for my kid to get him a tutor, that's support staff. And it's very tailored, very specific support staff for my child and my family. So I don't know. That's the way I look at it.
And Rob, it's at a less cost to the school, right? Because if we ask the school to hire a tutor one-on-one with each student, can you imagine how much we'd have to put in? So I actually think
it's hard because they have to measure how many students are going to need the person. It's hard. It's hard to budget.
Listen, guys, I've talked to a lot of parents who have to bring their kids to behavioral health and others, tutors and that kind of stuff. That $1,000 has dropped in the bucket. And again, if we're funding we have to think about public schools as a community good, right? And by pooling all those resources to provide these services to all students, including those who maybe don't have parents who can get them to behavioral health, to get them to extra help and those kind of things. My brother's a principal and was a principal at a school in South Bismarck. They would set up the appointments for behavioral health and other things. But if the parents had to bring them there, they would never get there. Now, think about if that behavioral health specialist was in the school and being able to provide that for everybody. I understand we have a different perspective on this, but to just sort of say, oh, everybody's going to handle this the same way and it's going to be great for every individual student, I think is a little naive. And I think the fiscal note says as much. I mean, because you're not saying 100% usage of this.
Yep. Yes, absolutely not 100%, because you're thinking there's two things that lead into the 70 is take-up rates and utilization. So, are they going to max out the 1,000? So now a little less will even apply, and then a lot will probably only use 7 or 8. How do they ensure they maximize it? Will they use every dollar? So I think that's a two-part into the 70% there. I think, Chad, that's just going to be something I fundamentally believe different than you, is that I think this is a very effective way to directly impact a child's outcomes.
I guess a term that I use a lot is that there's many paths, right? There's many paths to prosperity. There's many paths to success and happiness in your life. And I think with education, there's many paths. And the K through 12 system is a path. And it's a great path. But the thing is it can tend to be monolithic, and there's other paths too. And I guess I really like the idea of enabling some other paths. And also I sometimes get frustrated when we say, well, not all parents are going to avail themselves of this. Not all parents are going to make maybe the best choices for their kids. We can't legislate good parents. We can't. That's a cultural thing that we're going to have to.
Hold on. The legislature's trying, though, with fundamental rights and all those stuff.
We spent the whole first part of this show talking about how much we disagree with the legislature trying to do some of those things.
Understand.
I think so. I mean, those are problems I think that really do need to be fixed in our civic groups and our churches and our families. That's there. But I don't want to hold back the good parents who are going to who I think are most of them, almost all of them. I don't want to hold them back. And I don't think that's what Chad's advocating. Is there an element? I mean, obviously the school choice bill is a friction here, and I'm asking you probably an unfair question because you're passionate about the school choice part getting through. And I don't want you're going to say, well, you're asking me to negotiate against myself. But I mean, is there a point at which a willingness to set the school choice part aside and just focus on the ESA parts, if that's what it takes to get this through?
Question: if that's what it takes, I don't think that's what it takes. You saw a full only school choice bill just pass the House with incredibly high amounts. The president's executive order on educational opportunities made it clear school choice is not. It's here. We need a framework that approaches it smartly with high accountability. And I want to have the legislature have a hand in crafting that accountability. I think 2400 does that in a very smart way. So I think the time is now. So sure, in the last moment, if that's what it takes, I think it is critical. We do have a framework in place, which this ESA would do. But I also think the time is now for the school choice piece of it as well.
That was a really interesting part when the House was debating their bills. And it was something that I hadn't considered is the federal component, where we have an administration right now that's coming down with this, and they're saying we need to get out in front of this. So we have Chad shaking his head. So maybe.
Well, I mean, I just think it's adorable to think about if Joe Biden had done this 2 years ago, if the legislature would be standing up and saying, "Oh, the president said this is going to happen, so therefore we better pass a law." I mean, it's.
I would have, Chad. I would have.
It is silly.
I think if Joe Biden had started pushing school choice, I would hope.
Or Rob, anything else. I mean, I've never heard the legislature stand up and saying,
I have.
What the president
on regulatory
Okay.
things, they say something's coming down the pipe from the federal government, and we need to get in place the state. For instance, like coal, or where we regulate like coal lands and stuff, where we say if we don't do it, the feds are going to do it for us. That happens.
But can I just tell you how I think this could play out though with this framework? So what I think we're hearing is the changes to the federal level will really impact formula funds. So anyone unfamiliar with that, let's pick out like IDEA funds, for example. I think that's where we're going to see the major change and why this framework is so critical. So if a student who calls for IDEA funds opts out of the public school system, they just say goodbye to their IDEA funds unless they find programs that's willing to collaborate with each other. However, I think we're going to see where now those IDEA funds come directly to the student rather than the school. So when we have schools that are already doing it, such as Full Circle in North Dakota, I'm so excited to have a framework that works with the changes in the federal government and allows those families to choose a different option for those students for high need services. And so I think that's where we're going to see some really exciting changes. We didn't even talk about the other side of school choice today, which we have 5 minutes if you want to, but the
Oh, no, I don't want to leave this one yet, Senator.
the charter school side as well charter schools was also in the executive order. And I think it's really imperative that we have a framework to tailor exactly how we want charter schools to come in and operate in North Dakota as well. So I think the executive order had a lot of things that we need to make sure that we're ready to have a framework in place. But I think I see it playing out really with those formula funds, such as like 501, Title I, IDEA funds.
So I think we should have the senator back on to talk just about charters, because I actually think that charters are something people don't understand. I think
True.
even
Don't know.
people in the state who work on
I don't
education.
I don't know that I understand them.
Exactly right. So let's make that happen. But before we leave this one, I do have a question for you. And one of the things we talked about earlier is that private schools will help subsidize tuition of students. And one of the ways they're able to do that is the legislature passed a pretty significant tax credit for people donating to those funds. So if I give $100,000, I get a $25,000 tax credit. I think it works. If this ESA goes through and we're giving, again, public dollars to parents to pay for tuition, would you support closing that loophole? Because now the state's paying for it twice now. Because I think one of the reasons that tax credit passed and groups like mine didn't fight against it was this will allow the church or the private schools to help subsidize low-income people. But if this ESA does it, why do we still need that tax credit?
Chad, that's I wouldn't say right away, no.
Yeah.
Because as you know, the cost to educate is much higher than $4,000. This isn't covering the full cost to educate. And those donations could go to other things that the church needs as well. And so maybe sure if the program goes and we see how it goes in the future and we can increase the $4,000 to cover the cost of education and those dollars make more sense through this framework than that framework, absolutely. But I don't think shutting the door on that day one is a smart decision either until we know what cost to educate and what utilization looks like and how those two worlds work together. So
I think we should take the money raised for athletic facilities at private schools and put that into tuition for poor kids.
Boy, you're singing my song. I would get athletics out of the public schools. I'd get them out of the public universities. Anyway, I'm not going to go on.
Unless it's the Yankees and Dodgers, you're just anti-sports, aren't
Hey,
you?
those are private. But by the way, I'm against taxpayer subsidies for billionaire owners to build stadiums so their millionaire athletes can play. No thanks. As much as I love the Yankees, no thanks. Don't, Chad. You got me all distracted. I wanted to ask an important question to the senator. All right. Oh, you're actually going to let me ask the question. Right.
Well,
I'm going to make fun of you first, but go ahead and ask your question.
And then maybe we can get into the Larks versus, the Hot Tots rivalry someday, Rob.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we absolutely should. I wanted to ask real quick about the marketplace because one, I mean, obviously, I think that's the crux. This bill accomplishes nothing if the money doesn't end up benefiting students in all the myriad and very customized ways that it could. So tell me about this marketplace. Like, okay, I have $1,000 or whatever tier that I'm falling into, and I have this money available and I want to get a tutor or something. What does that process look like for me? I mean, do I just have $1,000 in my bank account or what do I do?
Yeah, the marketplace companies, first off, they are growing rapidly. They're innovating rapidly. They're meeting the demands of families. So there's, I would say, 3 ones that have been on the circuit a little bit longer that are really well established. But then there's a couple new ones that are winning the procurement processes in other states pretty rapidly as well. So I think even that, the marketplace world is quickly growing, expanding, meeting needs.
So what
So,
is
yeah.
it? Is it like the state of North Dakota has a marketplace, and then companies like apply to participate?
No. Well, I shouldn't say no right off the bat, but usually no. So a few states have hired a ton of FTEs within their departments to run it. Most states contract with these third-party entities. I'll give you a couple like Odyssey, Class Wallet. Those are a couple names if you want to look up on their websites. It's pretty cool. You can kind of step through what the parent profile would look like. But so let's talk about that. So if I'm a mom, I've got 2 kids, and so I log on and I apply to the program. So I type in my kids' information. These programs quickly verify with the systems. They partner with Department of Public Instruction to verify that your kid is enrolled in a school. And then usually within 12 to 48 hours, that's what they guarantee, the money would then be, whatever you qualify for, would be uploaded into your account. Once you see what your balance is in your account, it's like a online shopping center. So there's little check boxes that you could say, I'm interested in STEM camps, coding camps. I'm interested in tutoring services for math. I'm interested in dyslexia services. I'm interested in dual credit courses. So you would select those. Then there's 2 features of it. Once you hit search, it would show options that are within a radius you select, so like a 50-mile radius if you want ones that are tailored in person, tailored to your local area, or there's the virtual side of it. So then it'd say, here's the ones that are also available, high quality virtual. So you could see anything that applies to that.
So an existing, so like my kids have gone to the STEM, like a computer camp
Yep.
that's put on by Minot State University. They
Yeah.
put it on in the summer. We send our kids there. Potentially, that's something that would have like existing
That
programs
could
like
be
that.
on there. Yes. So the way it works is in the spin up phase, which is why I'm not going to rush the spin up phase. So whoever the procurement process would select, they come to the table with, here's some high quality things we've already researched and scrutinized. We recommend these. Then also they work with the community to have open periods where you, Rob, could say, hey, we love this science center and their camps. You type that in there, or in the online open period, the company that we would go with would research that, scrutinize it, see if it's a valuable thing, and then provide a recommendation to the Department of Public Instruction, who then has to say yes or no to every item before it's on there. So it is very highly scrutinized, but the backside company does all the research on those things. And then there's always an option for a parent request in there as well. If there's something that's not on there that the parent found that could be utilized better, company does the research, recommends approval or denial on there. And then you just have a balance that you can see things being used.
That sounds very
Rob, we're not going to cut off because I thought of another question. And since we
Oh.
have Senator Axman here, one of the things that came up this morning at appropriations was the fact that school meals were included. And
Yeah.
there seemed to be some consternation from members of the
A lot.
committee around the fact that that's included, and therefore the usage rate would be a lot higher. Do you see the appropriations seem to indicate they're not going to kick that out? That's not their job. But
Yeah.
do you see that as being something that maybe would be negotiated out and be a
I
separate
do.
conversation?
Yeah, I think, and I do think the conversation is worthy, and I hope the House, when we didn't really debate that very heavily because we did debate a lot of the major policy things in the Senate side. So I hope that discussion is had on the House side. I think there's pros and cons to having it in there, and I do hope that is heavily debated. So
because we have independent school lunch bills too that
correct. Yep.
you know,
We don't know where those are going to go.
maybe there's an opportunity to do them all together. I guess I don't know.
I just hope they don't cut it out just because of concern about usage rate, right? I mean, if that's what one parent wants to do with their $1,000 versus, maybe these other things don't apply. I think if you're going to do this, you want to make sure the usage rate is high, even though these things are expensive, right? And so if we're going to do it, we need to make sure everybody gets treated in a way that they can use it.
In chat, I actually don't see the usage rate as the negative to having it in there. I think, to me, the negative having it in there is, I would hate for a student who could really benefit from some tutoring is a parent saying, well, it takes me an hour to research all these tutoring things that are available on the marketplace, but it takes me 2 minutes to send it to my kid's lunch account. And then they never go get the tutoring that could have been beneficial. So that is maybe the negative I see to it. but I do see all the positives, which is why I put it in there.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I mean, $1,000 in my pocket is $1,000 in my pocket. It doesn't matter if it's covering lunch or tutoring, right? Because I'm still gonna have to pay $1,000.
But they may not go get the tutoring otherwise.
I would hate, and maybe a struggling family's already covered, although you can start to struggle on a very quick timeline that maybe doesn't
Absolutely.
qualify you. I would hate to put families in a position of choosing between tutoring and lunch. I don't know that we would, but we're over time. Senator, thank you for your time. I really
Thanks,
appreciate it.
Senator.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day. And you let me know when you want to talk charter schools.
Well, we'll have that conversation for sure.
Sounds good. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, do you have a question, comment, or something you want us to discuss on the show?
We want to hear from you.
Leave a voicemail or send a text to 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141, and we might feature it on an upcoming episode.
Thanks for listening to Plain Talk. Now let's get back to today's episode.
You know, Matt, during the break, was asking us to push the live show, and I absolutely want to push the live show. It sounds like the place is going to be packed. I don't want to dissuade you.
Oh man, what are you doing setting expectations like that, man?
I do, because this is the first time I've ever done something like this. So I've had nightmares about it just being you and me in a room, and not a lot of, and like some diners, like, who are these two weirdos? I don't think it's going to be that way. I think we're going to have a big crowd. 6 o'clock on Wednesday, February 19th. You're going to want to get there. There's left wings, there's right wings. Peacock Alley is a great place to come and eat anyway. So worst thing that happens, you have some delicious food and some drinks. And you have to listen to a couple of idiots up on the balcony haranguing you about.
I don't think you should call Aaron and J Bell a couple idiots like that.
I was referring to the two idiots who primarily do this show. Not that.
Oh, okay. Did you notice I went after J Bell and Aaron rather than Representative Ista and Senator Hogue? Did you notice that?
Yeah, well, that was nice of you.
That's pretty smart.
Very smart. The thing is, like, I almost kind of don't want to do what Matt. You know what Matt said to me before the show? He said, "I'm glad you're wearing a hat today." I'm not kidding you. He said, "I'm glad you're wearing a hat." He says, because when I'm making these video clips, I really have to work around your bald spot, because when you take notes, you put your head down, and boy, does it look bad.
Well, I mean, I don't have a bald spot. I'm just bald, so.
Right, so that's okay. So you just owned it. I'm still clinging to the idea that I have hair up there, and apparently it looks bad when I put my head down and the webcam is just full bore right into my bald
Rob,
spot.
I mean, like, I'm going to defend you a little bit. I've been doing this podcast with you for a long time, and I've been looking at that bald spot for years now, and it looks fine. I wouldn't say it looks good, but come on. It looks fine. It looks fine. Hey, so at the conclusion of the interview with Senator Axman, she said, "Thanks for being nice to me this time, Chad." And I said, "I was nice to you the first time, just in a different way." And she got quite a kick out of, evidently, when I'm a jerk, that's just me being nice in a different way.
The other kind of nice.
We disagree, and I think maybe I did a better job of disagreeing.
Listen, I mean, we started the show talking a little bit about Attorney General Wrigley, and obviously he gets very fired up, and we all have these things. I don't think any of us would be in this business and all the various ways that we're in it if we didn't care. And it's hard at times to set aside emotion. I get mad. The one reason I can't read social media is the number of people I see who are just confidently holding forth on things that they do not and it's not even just that I disagree with them. You fundamentally don't know how it works. And it makes me mad, and then I want to respond to them all, and I just shouldn't. It's just not a good use of my time.
And Senator Axman and I fundamentally disagree on public dollars being used for private schools, right? I mean,
you and I fundamentally disagree.
Yeah. And so what does this look like? And again, like, I think the idea of ESAs are fine. Would I rather just have this huge sum of money dumped into our public schools to benefit all students, all 125,000 public school students? Yes. I don't know that that's going to happen this session. And so what can we do to make sure that it's benefiting the most kids and most families possible? And I think that's a conversation we need to have now.
Yeah. And I do think there's value in doing education more than one way. this is an addendum to our public schools. And I do think schools can be monolithic at times. I was somebody who has never fit well in a classroom. I spent a lot of time sitting out in the hall because I had a hard time in the classroom. I spent a lot of time down at the principal's office. And I wonder if in the 1990s, if there had been more programs available for somebody like me, if I could have done a little better. I mean, basically, I got through school because I am very, very good at taking tests. And
So I
that's
would just say, one, we already have school choice in North Dakota. Anybody can go to any school they want. They can even homeschool them without any regulations, hardly at all. It's who funds that choice. And I would just push back a little bit on public schools being monolithic. There's incredible progress that's been made in the last 6 to 8 years on innovative education and in doing education differently for different students in public schools. I think we should have Dr. Amy Kopis come on at some point and talk about all the different things that are happening in public school districts, because that's one thing that sort of makes me angry. And I hear that during this debate a lot is that, well, public schools are just doing this outdated sort of thing and not recognizing the incredible progress that's been made to make sure that our kids are being educated in today's world.
we are certainly better now than we were in the 1990s when I went to school.
Right.
We have made big strides. That doesn't mean that we can't continue to get better, and that doesn't mean that we also can't try some different mechanisms. This
I would
is
say public school advocates aren't out there saying we're pitching a perfect game here. I mean, that's the other thing. But I do think to recognize CTE centers and some of those things that are being done dramatically different than how we did things in the past is important to recognize.
one thing that I think that's really important, because we make public policy in the aggregate, but we experience it on an individual level. So when we make broad appropriations to public schools, it's great. There's we have all these additional resources, but your individual experience in navigating them and accessing them in the school, some schools are going to do it better than other schools. Some schools, based on the communities that they're in, are going to have more resources than others. I really like the idea of a very individualized funding mechanism that really empowers parents to go out and get services on an individual, very tailored way.
I like the idea
in
of
addition to
Right.
all of the things that we're already doing in K-12.
And I like the idea of every kid in the public system getting an individualized learning plan for what's best for them. In order to do that, we need to make sure that we're not spreading our funding too thin. And I will tell you, Rob, all of us look at this. I think your point of we do policy from aggregate but experience it individually. I have a second grader, Wilmore Elementary School, and when I sometimes talk to legislators who are saying the public school system is failing and we need to upend the whole thing, that makes me very angry because this system is working for Evan. And so as a parent, when I hear those things, I'm not hearing it from a lot. I don't think Senator Axman is saying that.
You're not hearing it from me.
Yeah, but there are people who, and as part of this debate, you often hear we have to do this because little Johnny, I heard the story about one kid in one place having a bad experience. I don't think anecdotally we should be doing that. And I think by and large, parents in public schools are having a great experience. And so why not double down on that great experience and fix it for everybody else rather than diverting the money? And my biggest concern, Rob, is what we've seen in Arizona and Iowa and other places. These things start with $105 million. And next thing you know, both programs are costing, both public schools and ESAs are costing hundreds and hundreds or billions of dollars.
I mean, it's fair. I don't want to create a runaway cost problem. But on the other hand, I think sometimes, like, I am probably not as interested in defending the institution, and not even that they have to be defended. Like you said, our schools have to be fixed. Acknowledging that every school could probably do better, I don't think Minot Public Schools needs to be fixed. I think they're doing a great job. I think there's things that we could add to do better, and I think this is one of them. And this is the way, instead of pouring more money into the existing system that we already have, I want to continue to fund that appropriately, but I also want to put some money down a different avenue to achieve things that complement what we're already doing.
But you and I are going to just have a disagreement on what does it mean to continue funding it properly as well, right? I mean, so the governor says 2 and a 2% increase. The legislature's at 3 and a 3. With what it's costing to educate kids, Inflation. I don't know if you've heard, we had some inflation over the last couple
I have
years.
visited the grocery store recently.
Okay. Good. Although I thought Trump was taking care of that on January 20th, yet to happen.
I think he
Um,
forgot. Why not?
Yep. But I do think, what does that look like, right? When we have a teacher recruitment and retention crisis, if we're only increasing funding by 2% or 3%, teachers are going to get a raise around 1% because the rest is going to be used for healthcare and other things. That makes me nervous that we're not going to be recruit the staff we need in our schools and diverting money at these levels. I mean, this is if the lower number is correct, it's $105 million per year, Rob. That's real money. That's, we're talking about over 10 years, $1 billion.
Yeah, but I don't perceive it as diverted. That money is going to go to helping kids get educated. And if we continue to, and if the schools get a 3 and a 3, that's pretty much in line with what they usually get. So,
and we're falling behind, right? We have the teacher recruitment and retention problem is getting worse every year because we're only 3 and 3. That's what they've historically got. I'm not saying that the $1 billion is necessarily taking away from public schools. I'm saying that $1 billion should be invested to make our schools even better and better funded moving forward. You can't tell me if somebody brought in some other program for $100 million that wasn't being pushed by Donald Trump and others at a national level, this legislature wouldn't be saying, we can't afford that. And if I hear one more time about the executive order from Donald Trump, since when did we care what the feds say about how we should educate our kids in North Dakota?
yeah, see, but all the time. I mean, carbon capture, for instance, North Dakota is one of 3, maybe 4 states now that have primacy in regulating carbon capture. We invested in that to get out in front of the feds so that we could make decisions in North Dakota rather than have them made in Washington, D.C. We do that stuff all the time. And I don't really understand what you're saying. Well, if it was a completely different program that was supported by Democrats, all of these Republicans would hate it. That's a weird thing to say.
It's not a weird thing to say. You think it's
yes, it's weird. It's weird that Republicans want to spend money on policy that Republicans have long supported. This is not news, Chad. This is not weird.
It is weird that I've never seen a legislative session where the primary reason that people are leading with that we should fund this thing is because the president signed an executive order. What I'm saying is I've never heard, if Joe Biden signed the same executive order, you honestly think in this polarized world, people think we better respond to what Joe Biden is saying in a positive way. I understand defending yourself against Joe Biden, but saying that Joe Biden wants us to do this, so we better do it because he's the president.
I don't know. There was a lot of Democrats. I mean, Trump did some good things, criminal justice reform in his first term, and you can laugh about it, but isn't that what we talk about all the time? If Joe Biden suddenly came out and embraced a policy initiative that Republicans have long supported, I would hope that Republicans would set aside the fact that he's a Democrat and line up to take the W.
But Rob, you're missing my whole point. They're saying the reason we need to do this is because Donald Trump said we need to do this, and he signed an executive order.
And I
don't believe that's if they want to pass $100 million annual thing to subsidize private schools, because this doesn't create, you say school choice. This isn't school choice. This is subsidizing private schools because they're already funding these vast majority of it's true. It's true, Rob. The biggest private school district in North Dakota is here in Bismarck, and they subsidize all Catholics to go. You want this program to subsidize Capstone Academy, $15,000 a year for 500 kids in Fargo. That's how you think we should spend our money, rather than spending.
I think we can make a portion available to help kids attend all sorts of institutions. And listen, I get it. You work for an organization that represents public teachers. You do. That is always going to be the lens through which you see this. And I'm not going to change your mind, and I'm not going to try.
Rob, I want to ask you just a really simple question, okay? How does this create any more choice for a parent than they have right now?
because a lot of parents would like to send their kids to private school and don't have the money. And this could help bridge the gap. We, for the first couple of years of my daughter, sent our daughter to Our Redeemers. It's a Lutheran school here in Minot. We ultimately decided that wasn't for us, and cost was part of it. She may have stayed there if there were more funds available for us, but
Do you think
part of our solution was we were right on the cusp of being able to afford it. If we had some additional funds available, we might have stayed.
and you think that that this will create choice equally for everybody? So somebody who can't find
I think
10,000
I think you setting that as if it's not exactly equal for everybody, then we can't do it. I think is you opposing it by trying to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We are never going to craft a policy that is going to treat everybody equally. If absolute equality is our goal, we will never pass anything.
That's fine. I think that the barista down at Starbucks should really be subsidizing the millionaire doctor in North Bismarck sending their kid to seminary.
How are they subsidizing it? That
They pay
barista's probably
taxes.
not paying any income taxes.
Well, they pay sales tax, Rob.
Okay,
They all
that's
pay sales tax.
listen, we spread things out all around. I mean, the other thing, one of the opponents, some of what the opponents to the school choice bill are saying is, why should I have to subsidize school lunches for rich people who can afford to? That's
Yeah.
the same argument you're making.
Yeah, that's true. And by the way, it's not school choice; it's vouchers.
Okay, whatever you want to call them. I don't care what you want to call it. And I think we both agree ESAs are bigger than just the choice or the vouchers component of it.
Right, but again, what we've seen in every other state, that private school piece is the part that grows and grows and grows. And I guarantee if this Axman bill passes, it's going to cost more than $105 million annually. It'll cost more than the $210 million minimum to continue. And it's been a budget buster other places. And I think that we need to be looking at this. You and I talked about this fiscal note. The fact that only 50% of people are going to take the free money to pay for things that they're already paying for is a joke. It's a joke.
But it's a budget buster when we do it this way. But if we were pouring this money into the K-12 system, it wouldn't be a budget buster for you.
Well, I've never asked for a 10% increase in per pupil payments, which would be the same as this would fund.
Yeah. But I don't think it's fair to compare it to per pupil. This is fundamentally
Rob,
different than the way we're funding the constitutional obligation we have for students. This is fundamentally different.
The legislature has a job to prioritize spending. The amount of money they're spending on this program could be spent on per pupil payments of between 7 and 10% increase per year, which would mean raises for teachers, would mean more support staff to do more things. It's not that it's taking money from that, but it is a decision that the legislature made. This is about prioritizing things.
Well, I listen, I don't think from your perspective that we're ever going to spend enough money on paying teachers or anything else. That's your job.
Right.
I feel like there is an upper limit to that. And I feel like North Dakota's public schools, and I think you agree with me, we are doing a good job. We have good schools in the state.
Yep. And I want to keep them that way.
Okay. I want to keep them that way too. I think we can do this in addition. And I think make the overall education experience from the perspective of students and parents better. Students, most importantly.
Listen, I will go back to the things that I said at the beginning. Everybody, no matter if they're private or public, should be treated the same way. If you're a level of poverty, you should get the same amount of subsidy from the state as if you're in private or public schools, and that the money should not be used for tuition for private schools. I would imagine if we asked the public, the vast, vast majority would agree with me on both of those points. Beyond that, I mean, I think we agree on ESAs and how this should be done, but those two things need to be changed for this to be good policy.
I don't agree.
Which part don't you agree with?
Although I'm not really sure what you understand treating everybody the same. Like I don't.
So if I'm 200 right now, this bill says if I go to private school, and my income level is 200% of poverty, I get $4,000. If I'm a public school student and my family's 200% of poverty, I get $1,000.
Yeah, I see that.
Public and private school parent. If we're going to means test one side of the equation, we should mean test the other side of the equation. Otherwise, we are treating this is more school choice than ESA. Then at that point,
I don't like the tier thing so much. Let's pick a fixed amount. Maybe we split the difference and we say 2,000 for every student.
listen, you and I are look at
and then allow them to and then allow that for this is the part you're not going to like.
Yeah.
If you want to spend that $2,000 on tuition, go ahead. If you want to spend it on tutors, go ahead.
You're right, but we just solved one of my two issues. We're getting closer, Rob.
Getting closer. I would absolutely do that. And I would absolutely do that understanding that this isn't going to be once we've passed this bill. It's not going to be carved in stone. We can tweak, we can amend, we can improve. I do think it's something we should do though.
Give everybody $1,000 or $2,000, take up private school tuition.
Let's make it simple.
Let it buck.
Sometimes we do this with these bills where we like in the past where we put ballot measures on to change the initiated measure process, and there's like 3 different things, and it gets really confusing. I think they're running a risk with this tier thing.
Yeah,
I think this tier thing's too confusing.
I will say something though about the Axman bill. It is better than some of the other bills that are just private side, or even the Heinert ESA, where a parent has to put in $2,000 to get $1,000.
Yeah, like a matching grant. Yeah.
Well, but it's a 50%, right? I mean, that just doesn't work. I mean, that doesn't help a poor person go to school. But
if we're gonna do this, the Axman bill is the model. And again, I want this to benefit everybody. I want to be creating flexibility so that all the parents in all the parts of the state, from Standing Rock to Crosby to Minot to Fargo, has more flexibility than they did before to access more opportunities for their kids than they could have afforded before.
Rob, how long should we have this podcast go? Should we keep going? Because the other thing we should talk about, if we are subsidizing tuition at private schools, what do we expect from those private schools in terms of taking all students? Yeah. Like, are we going to allow discrimination at a Catholic school?
I think I have no problem tying strings to the public dollars, and if the public schools want them, get on board. And part of the reason I say that is it's just quality control, right? I don't want, and even for the homeschoolers, I have some heartburn about that. I think some homeschoolers do a wonderful job. I think others, I don't know.
And you don't want fly-by-night private schools popping up and just saying, hey, we'll charge you whatever the
I think one of the benefits, if we make money available, hopefully we do see more private schools come in, but I want to make sure that they're living up to the standards that our fine private schools that already exist in our state live up to. Bishop Ryan here in Minot is a great school.
Also, I don't want private schools to raise tuition by the same amount as the ESA as well, because that, again, doesn't do anything to help a parent.
That's what we did in higher ed, where we kept making money available, low, basically free, low interest student loans. We made all this money available. And what did the universities do? They gobbled it up with tuition hikes.
Right. And so I think that's the other thing we really need to talk about is this choice for parents, or is it schools choosing kids? We need to make sure that's not the case. We've now talked for 90 minutes. There's no way anybody's still listening to us. Matt's going to be mad.
I have seen, well, Matt's we're actually creating more work for poor Matt, but he did make that remark about my bald spot. So Matt, this is your payback.
Yeah, this is your payback. By the way, we got a live show on Wednesday.
We have a live show on Wednesday. It's going to be a blast. I hope you come. Be there at 6:00. That's kind of when doors open. Chad and I are going to be there at 5. We're going to walk in. Cher's going to be blaring in the background. That was one of my requests.
I specifically asked for there not to be any Cher.
Okay. Well, I don't like Cher either. I just wanted to embarrass Chad. All right. Once again, February 19th. That's Wednesday. Peacock Alley in Bismarck. If you're in town, come stop by, say hi. We'll be hanging out. We'll record a podcast. We'll have a lot of fun.
And the port hecklers, make sure you show up early so you get front row to
please don't heckle me. Please don't.
Yeah.
That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
That was a lot, Chad. So
Yeah, I understand. But I also just said under, just so you know, I
Yeah,
know how these podcasts work. It might never get back to me to ask another question.
Yeah.
So I need to get all my stuff in.
but
I feel attacked by that, Chad.